and everybody's talking about, hey, Jalen Hurts, top money, big money. And then, oh, by the way, right there, his backfield mate, Miles Sanders, is going to be a free agent. And I look around the league, teams that put big time money into running backs, it usually doesn't work out. Let's see how many likes it's going to take for Neil Stratton to do the gritty, of course, CEO and founder of InsideTheLeague.com. Neil, how many likes do we need to get today for you to do the gritty next week?
Oh, boy. I don't know if anybody wants to see me dance. I guess if we got 20, I think that would be
okay.
But that may be a really hard sell, Rick.
Well, you're underselling yourself, Neil. You're setting the bar low. And, we have you on here, of course, Neil Stratton, InsideTheLeague.com. I forgot to mention, Dane Vandernat does a great job over on smww.com. If you want to do his football GM and scouting course, Neil Stratton over on InsideTheLeague.com, also bringing you literally Inside the League with Zoom calls, current and former NFL front office executives on the regular, and of course, his books, Moving the Chains, Scout Speak, two of my favorites, highly recommended over there. You can get them on Amazon.com. But Neil, we bring you on here to kind of take us inside the league, right, with the scouting and the agent community. We've kind of dived into the Jalen Hurts whole contract scenario pretty deep on the football playbook. But I was getting into this with Dane. It's like, hey, there's going to be 11 starters and another 3 or 4 key valuable backups or reserves that are hitting the free agent market next year. And everybody's talking about, hey, Jalen Hurts, top money, big money. And then, oh, by the way, right there, his backfield mate, Miles Sanders, is going to be a free agent. And I look around the league, teams that put big time money into running backs, it usually doesn't work out. Like, I look at Saquon Barkley. I hate to pick on him. He went number 2 overall. They got a lot of money tied up in there. And the Giants have never been good since they drafted him. And say what you want about Ezekiel Elliott. He's been an all-pro, Pro Bowl performer, one of the top. Dallas Cowboys haven't won anything. Like, even Adrian Peterson, for a Hall of Fame career, never really put a team on his back and carried a team to the Super Bowl. So I wanted to pick your brain about how feasible is it for the Eagles to bring back a running back when they're negotiating a potential long-term deal with their franchise quarterback. And, oh, by the way, you got about 10 other starters that you have to worry about. What can you tell us about previous contracts? What can you tell us about the standard market out there on the running back situation? And what can we expect as Eagles Nation to see come offseason with Miles Sanders?
Well, if you look at the top 15 or 20 running backs as far as salaries right now on average per year, you see that a lot of them are still in their rookie deals, which kind of goes to the point you already made, Rick. There's still not an appetite in the NFL for giving big second deals to running backs because of their durability, and I guess the perception, at least, that they're pretty disposable, and most teams are trying to find 2 guys to pay rather than just one. I think given that circumstance, Sanders is going to be an affordable piece for him. I look for them. He's probably looking at 2 years at maybe around 6, maybe 7, depending on how this season goes per year. I think that's something you can afford, and then maybe they continue to look for a little help in the draft. I'm not sure exactly how old Sanders is. He's late 20s, somewhere around there.
No, he's only I think 4 years in, so he's probably around 26.
Yeah, right around there. So I think he still is going to be someone who's affordable for him. They may want to kind of upgrade, but I mean, if he has a productive season, he's certainly been a key part of that backfield for a little while. And, he's a standard grade running back in the NFL. Again, I don't think he's going to be looking for a lot of money. The agencies he's with is pretty reasonable. I think their history is not such where they're going to be trying to really break the bank. So I think Sanders is probably a guy that they can find something for. And I think he sticks around with the team for at least a couple more seasons until he gets to that right on the threshold of 30 and where he's probably on the wrong side and they're looking to upgrade.
He definitely has another NFL contract in him. So Chase Edmonds, I think that was his second or third team, but I think he's kind of in that tier 2 category, like a Chase Edmonds. I would even compare him maybe to like an Arian Foster with the Houston Texans. the way that Miles Sanders is playing, he's playing at a very high level, very productive. But to the point you just made, like running backs are so susceptible to break down at any given moment.
Mm-hmm.
I can't really think of a running back contract that you said, hey, that was a good deal, or hey, that really worked out. And like even Alvin Kamara, who you mentioned last week, as good as he is, like he's still not capable of keeping the Saints afloat because guess what? The quarterback's always hurt or injured. And I mean, it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough when you have all these pending free agents. And, oh, by the way, Devonta Smith is going to be eligible for a contract in 2 years. I just don't know how you keep all these teams, all these players together. And we're seeing that around the league because I know another thing that you're keeping tabs on at InsideTheLeague.com is how many guys are drafted by a team and let go by a team, but actually remain in the league. So, you know what? You might not have hit necessarily on the draft pick, but you knew what you were looking at because, hey, you know what? These guys are still kind of hanging out around the league. What have your tallies shown you? I know the Eagles are one of the players here. What have you found from your studies?
Well, speaking of the backfield, Boston Scott's a guy that was drafted by the Saints, but he's had some good snaps with the Eagles. He's hung around. He's a small guy, but he still can run a little bit between the tackles. You see players that are drafted by teams. Maybe they don't stick on a roster for one reason or another, but they wind up staying in the league. And to me, that's a pretty good measure of how effective an NFL team's scouting department is if they can find guys that are league grade, even if they aren't good enough at 53 for a number of reasons. Our breakdown last week, in the Friday wrap in our weekly newsletter found that the Eagles were tied for 22nd in the league in total former draftees with 44. As perspective, the Ravens came in number one with 70. The Vikings were just one player behind with 69, and there were three teams that were tied with 57. That puts, the Eagles were in that bottom 10 as far as players, and they in the last 10 years they've drafted 71 players. So they're getting. It's not like they're trading away all their picks and they don't have a lot of selections. They've got averaging 7 per year. So they're getting a decent haul, and the players aren't sticking around. And I think that's elite in the league, I should say. And that may be one reason why Howie Roseman kind of turned over his scouting department in the offseason. He wanted to see some fresh perspectives. He wanted to see different ways of looking at things, perhaps bring in the analytics a little bit more so and have a greater impact there. And that's a little hard to do when you've got a veteran scouting staff that's going to be resistant to that kind of thing. So it was an interesting look at things. I think that the Eagles will look to try to improve as they go forward in the sustainability of the players that they draft. As, again, more perspective, the Cowboys were tied for 6th just looking in the division. The Commanders are 16th and the Giants 17th. So they were the 4th team in their division. Just as this is just one gauge of the effectiveness of a scouting staff. But I think it is a relevant one because you pick players and that if they don't work out with you, they go straight out of the league. That's a pretty good indicator that the league didn't share your opinion on those players. And there's a lot of scouts out there doing a lot of evaluations. To find out that other teams didn't like your guys is not such a great sign.
Pretty interesting stuff. And before my next point, you just said something that I want to follow up on. You said that the new Eagle scouts or some of the people that were brought on are maybe a little bit more analytical. Is that kind of a point of emphasis that Howie Roseman wanted to implement with his hirings in the front office and the scouting department?
Well, what I'll say is this. They brought one scout in from Cleveland. Cleveland, as we know, is a team that's really heavily leaned on analytics, and they brought another scout in from the college ranks to work on the pro side. Those are just two. And those, I think when you're bringing in younger scouts, they're going to naturally be more given to those kinds of methods, at least certainly be more open to them and more accepting of them, even if they aren't necessarily ingrained. So I think that's a sign that that's the direction they're going now. Brandon Hunt coming in, he's from a much more traditional team, the Steelers. They've got a number of others who, kind of fit into the mix a different way. So I'm certainly not trying to say that they're going off and trying to become, Cleveland East. But I do think it's possible that they're a little more open to that. And that may be why, that may be one way they're trying to change the look of their scouting department and kind of maybe even their philosophy a bit.
Neil Stratton, InsideTheLeague.com, breaking it down, chopping it up with us here on the Football Playbook Thursday, September 22nd. I noticed here in your research, there's 9 former first round picks and 27 day 2 picks that have moved on to other teams. So I found that interesting. Also, by the way, in case you want to get this information direct to your inbox, go to insidetheleague.com. You can sign up for the Friday wrap. And of course, the succeedinfootballblog.com, succeedinfootball.com is free. There's a whole lot of moving and shaking with the NILs and a lot of stuff going on. We got the Hub Football Transfer Portal Showcase going on next month with Coach John D. Filippo, who should be on the show tomorrow. He'll be one of the coaches there, along with good friend Eugene Chung. But the NIL, speaking of college football, is still kind of somewhat a wild, wild west. I know you've been bringing in experts and having speaking panels in terms of how to navigate it. My good friend Jim Mora up there at UConn, they just announced this morning and a whole new NIL relationship. What can you tell us about the moving and shaking of this NIL class?
Well, we know it's having a major impact. What we're trying to do at ITL is try to bring the concepts of NIL to our people, the people that are working with players. Obviously, we're bringing in Sammy Spina, who's with Vantage Management Group. Sammy has worked with Kenny Pickett as well as Dan Marino on the NIL side. He knows exactly what he's talking about. We're going to be offering a 4-week course on NIL and how to make NIL something that agents can monetize and really turn into something that can be a part of their palette, I guess you'd say, their professional palette, and how they work with players. So that's something we'll be offering. That's going to kick off next month. It's going to be $100 for just for 4 classes, and we're hopeful that it can be a real difference maker because there are so many questions out there. I mean, we're looking at ways to kind of monetize or maybe perhaps make better the transfer portal with services there. There's so many things out there right now, Rick, and so many things that make the game even more interesting than it normally, than it used to be. We're just trying to figure out all the angles there, just like you are, just like everybody else is with what you're doing at Hub, and bring players in that would normally be street free agents. You're giving them a platform, obviously, and having a lot of success there. There's so many ways, I think, to really kind of try to be entrepreneurial about the business, and that's what we try to do Inside the League.
No, the NIL has always been fascinating to me, and Charlie Batch was the guy. I know he was campaigning for his alma mater and offering quarterbacks $1 million to come sign with Eastern Michigan, Central Michigan, right, wherever he played. You mentioned Dan Marino, good friend of the show, by the way. Is he also involved in the NIL? Is that for Pittsburgh, or what's he doing?
I don't think he's involved per se, but the people that he's worked with certainly are. And they kind of, I guess, cut their teeth with Marino. For my money, it's still the best ever. And then have moved on to work with other players and find opportunities there. So it's really interesting. I think the challenge for people in the NIL space is conveying to players that this is not some kind of a passive income stream. I mean, I think a lot of the perception out there is that I can send a post and then just start counting my money. If you really want to excel at this, you've got to be willing to become a personality on social media, and you've got to be able to kind of put yourself out there and really put time into it and attention and what have you to really craft it. And then if you can do that, you can have something that is sustainable. But again, most players still haven't really grasped that, and they're thinking, hey, I just want to play football. And I get that as well. It's a difficult kind of a fine line to walk there. We're going to be trying to help agents and people that are in that space really relate that to players in a way that they can understand.
Yeah, and I believe in 2-3 years from now, college football will be viewed as a pro sport because these guys will be getting paid so much money. I mean, look at Jordan Addison. I mean, millions of bucks being thrown at this guy. So if you happen to talk to my guy Dan Marino, tell my paisan I said hello. We did a great interview with him at Anthony's Coal Fire Pizza a couple years ago. The Marino Parmesan is a great sandwich over there, by the way. So that's interesting. Now, also interesting is, we're only 2 weeks into the NFL season, but it's never too early and never too late for an NFL mock draft. So I know if you sign up for the Friday wrap over at InsideTheLeague.com every Friday night, you get Neil Stratton's newsletter, and you did a review of the top 7 mock draft services. What were you able to find out with players moving up, moving down? What do we got moving and shaking here?
Haven't done it yet, but we will have that in tomorrow's edition, and we'll look at what's happening to players. As I guess we're 3-4 weeks in for some teams. That's enough for some players to be rising and some falling, and we try to look at how 7 top services look at the players with their mock drafts immediately after the draft, and then we kind of watch, kind of trace that through the season. We'll do that 3 more times between now and the end of April, and it's always fascinating to kind of trace the evolution, see who's rising, see who's falling in a comprehensive way. If you look at it, going all the way through the year, it really tells a story of kind of how the college football season evolved and how these players all moved. It's always interesting because you'll go in that first mock right after the draft, and they're players that is on nobody's radar. And then in some cases, like Baker Mayfield several years ago, the first year we did it, he was on nobody's first rounders that immediately after the draft and wound up being the first pick in the draft. Same for Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow was thought of as a nice second, day 3.
We thought he was a game manager, Neil.
Exactly. He's a career backup, winds up being the number 1 pick in the draft over Tua, who was everybody's number 1 going into it. So it's really kind of fun to watch the mocks evolve and change and see who's rising and who's falling and which service is really willing to go out on a limb and really, look at and say, hey, this guy's got first round bona fides, even though nobody else is talking about him. Some people really want to do that. Then there's PFF, which is one of the services we monitor. They're a lot more analytical, obviously a lot more analytics driven in the way they do things. So it's just really interesting to kind of see how all of them differ and how all of them kind of put their boards together and how they're similar as well. There's a lot of copycat out there as well. There's no denying that. So we'll have a breakdown of all that in tomorrow's edition, and looking forward to reading it and kind of seeing what we figure out.
Yeah, there's no exact science when it comes to the NFL draft. I always say if somebody has mastered the evaluation process, they'd be a millionaire a million times over. But 217 days, by the way, till the 2023 NFL draft. And I do find it fascinating, especially when it comes to quarterbacks. You mentioned Baker Mayfield. Nobody was talking about Joe Burrow. Kyler Murray is another guy that really came out of nowhere. Dwayne Haskins. Yeah, Nobody thought that guy was going to be the 16th overall pick, right? And so
no one thought he was going to be the number 2 pick. There's always an it QB that rises through, and no one was expecting it to happen. I mean, to some degree, Kenny Pickett was that guy, even though he didn't certainly get in the top 5. But it's really fascinating to watch the passers kind of move up based on this kind of season they have.
No, I'm going to be curious to see who some of these mock drafts have, and kind of compare some notes over at the NFLDraftBible.com, because that's what we do.
That's right.
And since 2002, just about the same time as InsideTheLeague.com was born. So what else you got going on? Any upcoming seminars? Anything else you got cooking over there at the motherland?
Well, for the new agent class, we've kind of talked about that a little bit here. They just got their results back last week, and we'll be starting our monthly Zoom series, kind of getting them coached up on what to expect and what their rookie year is going to be like as agents, and kind of how to recruit and what to tell the players that they're talking to, how to get them into all-star games, and all the different parts of the process that you play a key role in, Rick, and so many other people around the industry do. And that's what we do at ITL, is try to help people get better and help them succeed in football. That's why that's our motto.
No, hey, we appreciate everything you do servicing the NFL community. A lot of big things going on. That's why we check in with you. We try to check in with you, hopefully, each and every week. Neil Stratton, InsideTheLeague.com. Of course, SucceedInFootball.com. Go check them out. Moving the Chains on Amazon, along with Scout Speak, which is really a great read if you want to get tales from the scouting trails, as I like to call it. Dane Vandernack comes on right before you. He talks about, all his scouting journeys, and you have great Scout Speak.
Dane's yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Stories.
Yeah, so and we got a lot of good stories that we share off the air as well. So
yeah, stuff that happens off the grid a little bit. I should also mention, Rick, we're 2 weeks away from beginning our balloting on the BART list, which will be where we try to find out, based on the votes of active NFL scouts, who they see as the best evaluators in the league. And it'll be interesting to see if the 10 scouts from each conference repeat, or if they have a new list of, if there's some new faces that are in there, and we will be announcing the winners at our seminar in February at the Combine. We're doing things a little differently this year. We won't be putting the winners out as we did last year. We're going to wait, and we're going to have a little more suspense, and then we'll have the people actually accept the awards there at the Combine at our annual seminar, which you always produce and play a key role in. So that's also on our radar, and we're looking forward to our second year of recognizing the best and the brightest among the evaluation community.
No, it means a lot to me, not just because you have awarded a lot of executives that have gone on to be decision makers and GMs, but really because the Bart Awards are named after our good friend Danton Bartow, who passed away from COVID complications and was a regular on the State of Football, my previous show, and somebody that I had a chance to spend some quality time with on the scouting trails, and somebody that you knew dearly. And so we lost him just over a year ago and change. And so we really appreciate you keeping his legacy on with the Bart Awards. And of course, Inside the League will be, what is it, the 14th annual scouting seminar?
Yeah, 14th. I can't believe it. My gosh, it'll be 20 years before too long. It's pretty amazing. But
unbelievable stuff. That's why we bring you on. Neil Stratton, InsideTheLeague.com. Neil, we'll see you next week, my brother.
Looking forward to it, Rick. Have a great weekend.